Hi. Hi, dear people. It's Labor Day. Labor Day. Labor Day mean. Um, I tried to video last night. I'm so disappointed because maybe I ratcheted up the rhetoric a little too much. And look, I even tried to get a better audio feed going because someone told me there was quite a echo in here. So I turned off all the fans and different things to try to help. But the video I did last night did not upload from the YouTube Google chat. So I'm praying to goodness and golly and good gumption and all them good words, got words, God, um, that this video will be able to be seen on YouTube today because today is Labor Day. Now, I want to talk about the word labor. Why do women, when we go into birth and babies, do they say that we're in labor? It's not a hard question. Not a hard question. Labor is work. You can be sitting in labor and just sweat breaking out on your forehead because your body is in extreme stress, pain, and your muscles are working. You're in labor. You're laboring to give birth. And that's what I'm doing. I'm doing here on Mother's, with Mother Jones behind me and solidarity and trying to remember stories from Cabin Creek. I'm laboring to give birth to some ideas that perhaps have been forgotten. Now, when my kids were little, uh, especially Nadine, the oldest girl, she'd say, "Oh, I forgot." When she wanted, I'd put her toy up or something, and I'd say, "Well, I forgot I put it up there," and she'd say, "You forgot, Mama?" And she would put the emphasis on the forgot, and I would say, "Yes," because she's about 2 or 3, but she couldn't quite understand what forgot meant. So she was like, "You forgot, Mama?" Yeah, I forgot. You'll have to help me remember. And that's what I said to her. You'll have to help me remember. And she said, remember. I said, yes, remind me so I can hear in my mind um, what you need me to remember. And then if you forget, I can remember. And if I forget, you remember. And so it's kind of helping your child at 2 or 3, create a linear conversation of and uh, what time it is and where you got to be and what you got to do. It has a lot to do with cycles of life, cycles of time. So it really tickled that little girl when she would say, "I remembered, Mom, and you forgot." Yeah. And they did it up in at their grade school and teenage years, Oh my God. If I forgot a doctor's appointment, they're like, no, you forgot on purpose. No. Well, maybe I did. And so it was kind of a joke getting older about what we choose to remember, what we choose to forget. And it's no different. Labor, it's like a mother when she's in labor. The moment you have the child, the pain, and it's at a level that's bearable. And when they place the baby in your arms, it's like, I mean, if it was as bad as it is, and it is bad, the first time, why would women have more children? I don't want to say they forgot the labor pain, but they knew that at the end it was over. And when I look at cycles of time and memories, and my first podcast, I suggested that I'm putting pieces of memory together to share story, oral truth with you. Um, you don't always think in a linear fashion or in a chronological way, because it is bits and pieces, and it also fits a broader picture. So I got to thinking how, I wanted to talk to you guys about remember Labor Day and remembering labor. And so I put it like this: remember. What does it mean to remember? What does it mean? What is the root of remember? And so it's remember. And is what, I don't know, they call prefix or something. But here's the easy way to understand what remember is. And I have a whiteboard. I'm not really good, but yeah, ooh, we know what that is. Dismember or dismemberment. You remember in the old days, and the king would have you drawn and quartered. He had a little stick man, and he'd have horses out here, and 4 horses. 4 horses he would have, because what he'd do, if you was a bad subject, he would put you out there in public. He would dismember your ass. Oh, sorry, Aunt Carol, I didn't mean to cuss. But what they did was put the person in the middle, and then they would, of course, tie a rope, tie his hands, tie his legs, and tie his legs. And then they'd shoot the shot off, and the horses would go off in different directions, Well, I think I got them facing the wrong way. I could put his head over here. I forgot. His head can be on his ass sometimes. Dismember, dismemberment, okay? Because the reason why some things in history are not remembered is because they're not written down, and they're not a source of discomfort to anybody, because they're not in the pain anymore. And like the mother who's not in the pain anymore about having the baby. But if you've got these pieces of a story, like here's our man, he's been dismembered. See, he's been dismembered. If we want to remember him, then we bring back and we attach all the wonderful pieces of his body. See, we remember. We put the members of his body back together. Because the body of knowledge, or the body of truth, is a being. It's not something literary, not something historical. It's not something that you can declare, this is the honest to goodness truth. No, because we know, Napoleon said, or one of them, the history is written by the victor. Okay, the victor. Who's the victor? The victory. So we can't really look at history because they've been cooking the books ever since the printing press. Of course, that made them all mad. You couldn't print the Bible in English. That started a lot of trouble. We don't want people educated to their divinity and who they are inside. We want them working for their labor. And so I was looking for a word. I have this book called The Complete Word Book. It's kind of crazy. A lady gave it to me for my secretarial just auditing and stuff for an office. And so I was looking in it for a word to work with work. And I had already thought about this last week too, because I had a cold last week, and that's why I didn't broadcast to you guys. Wasn't able to. But this word kept coming to my mind, worm, WORM. And I thought, why, if I think of the word work, why do I think of the word worm? Because sometimes what I do is I pray and meditate on things, and then I lay down and sleep on it. And you might call me an old cow. I just mull over it and chew the cud and think about it. But in that secretarial book, it had a few not nice things to say about human. It was humans. Yeah, it was the word human. I was looking at the word human, and it said he is Job 25:26. So I ran to get a Bible, right? And I read, how much less, so mortal man, who's a maggot, and son of man, who's a worm. What do worms do? Oh, I have a fly in here. You don't bother me. What do worms do? Huh. Yeah, you catch them and go fishing. But that's not what really worms do. Worms aerate the soil, and they promote a healthy soil. And anytime you see worms in abundance, you have healthy soil. Because as they move through the dirt, they're pooping, and they're creating, they're oxygenating the soil and aerating the soil. So it makes sense that in Job or Job, that they would call man a worm. You see, it's a phony phonetic language, for one thing. It's phony phonetics, because only one corporate master, who my papa called the taskmaster, or we might call the hidden hand of government, or the banking elite, or whatever you want to call them. I call them corporate master. Only them could write a book such as this, inspired of the God, and call man a lowly worm. Because yes, he toils the soil. Yes, he labors with his hands and the sweat of his brow, and he does all of those things. Because believe me, the elites don't see us as human beings. They don't see us as people. They see us as herds of people, and that they cull, and that they move in directions that they want them to go. Okay. And so people send me stuff all the time, little links to watch or this or that, which you can just send it to me at teamrural@gmail.com. It's right there. I think it's in the about section. You can contact me or leave it in the comment section, a link, and I'll watch it or read it. I prefer to read. But anyway, getting back to what I was talking about. Common man has not had a common history. A guy sent me a link to something called the fourth turning, and that we are indeed in a crisis mood, or a fourth turning right now in history. And he's, like, went all the way back in American history, and he can look at these every 20 years, 22 years or so, turns where the generation that's coming after the first one kind of balances out or tries to undo what the previous generation did, and that society would have went off a cliff a long time ago if you didn't have those checks and balances, generational cycles. And they have different archetypes, like the hero, the artist, the prophet, the I don't know, there's another one. But I think the takeaway for me, because I kind of researched him and read some from his website, Life Course. His name is Neil Howe, Howe. One of the takeaways that I had was, well, yeah, they do label our generations like Generation X or the Millennial Generation or the Baby Boomers or the GI generation, which was the ones that fought in World War II. And it talks about how every 80 years or so that we go through these cycles. I love that. I love that because guess what? I got one for you. You heard this word, right? Recycle. 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 It can't even be a bicycle. It has to be a recycle. So the thing is, for me, when I hear those words, cyclic or cycle, I think of Ecclesiastes that says to everything there's a season and everything there's a time under the sun, because um, it also says there'll be a generation that will see all these things come to pass and they will not die. They will actually see um, a new paradise on earth or a new life or a new 1,000-year reign or this 1,000-year stuff. And of course, you want to take that literal. That's okay. I can take that literal. But when I hear people like Neil Howe talking about cycles of time, and he goes back 80 years, I thought, wait a second. He's not going back this far because, well, what was that generation called? 1917, 1910, 1900. So I had to go Google it because a couple of the hour-long talks that I watched him give, like at Hilton Head Island and the different corporations and this and that, and what I read on his website, I really couldn't see what he was calling the generation before my grandfather. That was the GI, which are the senior citizens. And then I did hear him on something, and he did mention them, and he called them the lost generation. Okay, he called them the lost. And the reason I put that in parentheses is there's a song. It's called Amazing Grace, and it says, "I once was lost, but now I'm found. But now I see." Because see, for me, this is Labor Day. I'm birthing a story to you. I'm in labor here. And I hope you help me get through this. Because my people, 95 years ago, about 4 days ago, exactly not 4 days ago, about 95 years ago, were laying their weapons down from the largest civil uprising in. It was the largest labor insurrection in American history, but it's not taught about because they don't remember. I mean, there's some things going on now, a little museum started up, but I think it also is a consciousness of some of us that were descendant from those people, because we've been kind of fussing and raising a little Cain about the fact that they've not told the story, and they certainly haven't given the oral story a word chance to get in the mix, because what I see is mostly propaganda and not what I heard from my people. And let me tell you something. I trust what I heard from my old people um, before I trust what I hear from you, especially about such a thing as what they lived through. And now this guy, he wrote this book in 1997. I think it's a part of why intellectuals don't get this labor story and they don't understand labor or common people, because it's uncommon for people to love one another and find the goodness in one another, to stand beside each other shoulder to shoulder, because back in those days they called it the Bolsheviks or the anarchists or the communist scare and all that crap. But my grandfather said um, it wasn't none of that. They had these red bandanas. Every coal miner had one up there. And not because he bought it. They think they were 10 cents by 1920. Heck no, he didn't buy it. The coal company gave him one. Now the coal company charged him for the pickaxe and the uh, shovel. He had to pay for his tools when he came to live there, because um, nothing was really free when they were brought up there to the company houses. Um, by the time my papa was striking on Cabin Creek, they were bringing in more immigrants, Italian and European, and when they couldn't get enough of those people to come, then they had freed slaves from the South. This is why at least 1/3 of the coal miners at the Battle of Blair Mountain were black men, and so there are black rednecks, because this is what they would do. Everybody that came to work at the coal field was given a red bandana. And the reason Dave was given a red bandana was told to me by this nice lady named Joy at this Whipple Store Museum. Yeah, yeah, she told me, because she had bought an old company store, had artifacts and stuff in there. And she said the reason they give them the red bandana was because if they went underground and they hit their thumb, or during labor and they were working, and if they cut themselves or something, they were bleeding, they did not want these miners to go into shock or go into stress. So they didn't see the blood, how much blood was pouring out their body. So this is why they weren't given a white bandana or yellow or blue. It had to be red. And they were doing this in 1800s and 1900s and 1910. When my papa, in his first strike, I'm thinking it was 1910, 12, something like that. See, I'm remembering. Remember. Um, but by the time 1921 got here, and the battle for Blair Mountain that I'm speaking of was fought 95 years ago, August the 25th to September the 2nd, a 5-day war with the state of West Virginia. My grandfather said the only thing they had to identify themselves was a red bandana, because they didn't have uniforms, and they didn't have a way to recognize each other. And many of them had been living in tents, so they didn't have money. They were striking. And the time that they were striking, the people from Pennsylvania and Ohio in the coal fields that were paying union dues were buying the 50-pound bags of feed, like cornmeal and beans and rice. And Papa told me how they would deliver these in croaker sacks and flour sacks, and um, then they would divide it while they were living in tents with each other. So they depended on their brothers and sisters in Pennsylvania and Ohio to feed them through the labor strike, so that everybody could get paid a decent wage. And they went away to World War One, and they was told if they didn't strike, that when they would get a wage increase when the war was over. Well, we all know what happens when wars are over. the need dropped, so the price of coal dropped, and of course the men were treated worse, and especially those that even came back as veterans, they were treated worse once they got back. So that's like 1912, 13, 17, something. You start getting into those dates, and because my truth is not a linear, chronologically based story, but what it is based upon is love. Because grandfather said that when the veterans came back, they knew how to march and do flank formations, and they knew medics. Some of them had become medics and cooks. And so when they were teaching the miners how to march in formation, how to do flank formations, I mean, when they went marching that 90 something miles from Marmet, West Virginia to Blair Mountain in August of 1921, I think there is some black and white footage of them marching 4 by 4, and orderly, very orderly. It wasn't chaotic, it wasn't a riot, but they were going to the southern coal fields where the mountains were very, very high and the ravines were very, very deep, and real corrupt politicians and sheriffs and people there that were every organizer or union representative that had been sent into the area had been lynched. Yeah, we know what lynchings are because we poor people, we well, we didn't. How can we forget something if we've never been taught? Huh? So we'll not belabor the fact that many people don't know the story of Blair Mountain, but many people don't know what happened in 1921 was a real culminating year. And see, I found that guy Neil Howe's book, his idea is kind of interesting because he called the generation from the 1920s to the 1940s or so the GI generation, which my grandfather was born in 1919, and he was 2 when Papa marched on Blair Mountain, but he had 3 older brothers. So, my uncles, they were still alive too. And I heard a lot of stuff. But I want to tell you something, what happened in June. June the 1st of 1921. Let's just give it a like a place to place it in the memory of a timeline of 1921, okay? And I bet you never guessed what it was. Uh, because you really got to talk to people and learn your history. 1921, June the 1st, 1921, Black Wall Street, burned. Tulsa, Oklahoma. Why is this important? Because Tulsa, Oklahoma had businesses, black businesses, and they were viable. They were very successful. The blacks were doing a very good business, uh, and let's just say corporate master couldn't have that. He couldn't have black folks growing their own food and buying from their black grocery stores and um, working within their own community to be independent and self-reliant. Because see, corporate master wants us to be good little worms, good little workers. Yeah, he ain't changed. Then where's he at? His cycles of time, his cycles, like an old grandfather clock. See, he just recycles the story. He just recycles it. So we don't want to forget, because I'm gonna bring it. I'm gonna bring it to you. And I pray God that this video, I'm praying again. The one I did last night, I probably got a little too hot. But for whatever reason, YouTube wouldn't process it and would not said. So I hope that you get this one. But during 1919 to 1921, there was also a thing called the Red Scare. And all that was about something called the IWW. It's the Wobblies. It was a union. You see, by 1919 to 1921, the government had done everything they could do to infiltrate and destroy the Wobblies because they had unionized down in Louisiana and Texas, had the audacity to bring in black laborers in the union. Holy Toledo. You just can't do that in the real world. Not in a corporate capitalist system. And all that time they're hollering Red Scare. Here comes the Battle of Blair Mountain. Now, the Battle of Blair Mountain happened in August 25th. It was when it started. The fires were shot. Well, it's kind of a longer story than that, but Blair Mountain happened. It took about 20 years to push my people into a corner. Okay. And when you're in a mountain, I mean, you ain't got no corners to hide in because the creeks go up and down and railroad tracks. There wasn't roads back then, baby. All there was railroad tracks in and out. They knew people coming and going. They sure did. People had to be loyal to each other and to their word because right here at the bottom in 1921, what happened in August? In the dog days of August, the hot dog days of August, they marched to Blair Mountain. They were black, white, and immigrants. Immigrants. Whew. How could you dare even ask for an immigrant to get paid the same thing you getting paid, huh? Well, I'll tell you why. They become brothers keepers. They became brothers and sisters keepers. They said, I will die for my brother on the other side of that mountain to be free, to have a union that he can join if he wants to get a better wage. And see, these people have monopolized media and the airwaves, and corporate master is what I'll say he is, till we're dismembered. We're dismembered as human beings. We've really been kind of thrown every direction and cast away into different vices and devices and things and ways and means to keep us from talking to each other about what's going on, because that's what they need. They need us dismembered, dementia or something. Shit. I mean, they need us to be compliant, okay? Because if we're compliant, continue this cycling, the cyclic circus. I want to call it a circus. A P.T. Barnum and Bailey 3-ring circus. That's what I want to call it. So that they can continue looking down upon the worker as the worm, the laborer, and the women. It's what they do. They don't really know better, because when they intellectualize, they're not down here on the ground with people like you or me, people who are on fixed incomes or food stamps or on working 2 part-time jobs. It gives you 3 hours here and then you got to rush over pay an hour's worth of gas to get to your next job. Um, messing up your cycles of sleep and stuff. It's not natural. It keeps us stressed. It keeps us on edge, and then it divides the family. Basically, that's their whole gimmick, is dividing the family. And if you notice, even in the Bible, it say, "Oh, he came to divide a family." And even in AA or NA, they say, you can't help the family you're born in, but you can choose the family you die with. Well, this is true. But this is why you have to choose your loyalty to people who are loyal to you, and your heart is resonating with their heart, because it is the greater call of universal. I call it the universal one, the unity, the completeness of God, or not even God. Heck, I've met atheists that are morally, beautiful people who are one. A good way to say it would be is one with nature, in that they're living in agreement with universal law, and they're like, the first law is do no harm. So I don't have a problem with atheists. I don't have a problem with Hindu, Buddhist, Brahmin, the Tao. I ain't got no problem with Confucianism. I ain't got no problem with Jehovah's Witnesses, Jesuits, Catholicism. I don't have a problem with none of those people, because guess what? That is the herd mentality. And they've just used religion to herd us into Seventh-day Adventists, or, oh, I'm a Southern Baptist. And you think about it, when someone asks you, what church do you go to? Well, they've ran out of real things to talk about. So they're on the superficial level of, are you an approved society? Because really, what people want to know when they ask you what church you go to is, are you bona fide? Remember that movie, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Watch that movie, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And made in 2000 with George Clooney. There's a lot of truth in that movie. I always go with some takeaways on movies when I watch them. And it is a really good movie, and it was during the Depression times, okay? But it really shows you how people during times of great stress do fall back on their humanity, and that they no longer wish to hurt each other. Yeah, they don't want to do that. Not really because of the Bible, because like I said, you can be a Buddhist and be a sweet, loving, beautiful person. You can be anything you want to be and be a beautiful person. You're not breaking God's law or man's law, and you're out there doing right. But I asked my Aunt Carolyn, of course, I was one of them kids asked a lot of questions. I didn't get a lot of answers, because the questions I would ask were always the ones that hear, teacher want to hear. Save that thought for later. We'll come back to that. That was the way they handled me. But I'll never forget my Aunt Carolyn, and I always talk about the women in my family, because I want women. Women, I want you. I want you. I love you. I love you so much. And we have the key to unlocking the cycles of time. We have the key. And men don't have the key. That's why they keep the history, because they don't have the key. We got the key. We give life. See, this is why cycles of life are important to us. It's our generations that are living and paying suffering. So I asked my Aunt Carol one time about, why was there different colored peoples on the earth? And I was probably about 8 or 9 years old. And when I had to really think back about it, because I did go to an integrated grade school, first through sixth grade. Yep, I'm that age. I remember little bits of JFK and MLK and little bits, just little bits, because of course I'm sure we were um, not able to see a lot of that, but my grandfather told me a lot about it. I remember asking my Aunt Carolyn when I went to see my daddy one summer, it was his sister, why are there different colored people? And she said the most beautiful thing, and this is how I explain it to my children. Um, she said, a rose, it will be pink or yellow or white or red. You smell the rose, it still has a fragrance and a beauty all its own, because the colors or the hue, the hue of the rose has changed. The hue. Now, that word hue, let me show you. That word hue, like pink is a hue of red, turquoise is a hue of blue. It's also a hue of green. So when we see the word humanity, see, we have to break it down. This is him. He's hue. He's a hue man of a family. Iti means of a family. So he's all colors of a family of man. Of man. And as soon as we understand that we belong to a family of man, yeah, family of man, we will find our humanity, because we are different slants of light in our soul and our energetic bodies as they interact, and we perceive the world with our senses, our ears and our eyes and our smell and our taste and our skin and the touch, and the way that we experience this reality is what is the causation of our different humanities. Okay, and they talk about melatonin in the skin, and this is true. It's all true. There's no need for them to teach all lies, as a friend of mine says. Why would they teach all lies when they can just sprinkle half truth into things, and then it sounds believable? This is when you have to start listening with your inner ear and your intuition and think for yourself, well, does that make sense to me? And believe me, if you just go inside, it'll start making sense if it's the truth to you. You don't have to be the truth to me. But you think about 1921, they burnt down Black Wall Street, got rid of these folks in Louisiana and Texas, and then Blair Mountain. And 3 days ago, 95 years ago, my people laid down their arms, and they gave their weapons back to the federal government. They expected the federal government to come into the state of West Virginia and give them a congressional review and to have hearings, and the exact opposite happened. They were many men arrested and put into prison for attempted murder, and a lot of them did 10 to 20 years jail time. And I asked my grandmother, because it was hard to get Papa to talk about it at all. We couldn't get Mama to talk about it much. It was hard. She wouldn't, but Papa would talk about it, but not much. And my grandmother said, well, the reason is, honey, there's no statute of limitations on murder. And none of those old people who lived during the 1910s and 20s, this was in the 70s, she told me this, they're not going to, or 70s or 80s, she said, they're not going to talk about it. And you can't expect them to talk about it. I think it was in the 80s, because I think I was trying to get Mama to open up after Papa had died. My mama never really filled me in on much of nothing. I have no idea why the men talk to me. I really don't. Beside, I ask questions, and I was the oldest grandchild. As far as I knew at the time, I was the oldest grandchild, and I've since found out there's older grandchildren, but I was the first one around that house. Um, So I want to get back to these cycles of time and this guy fourth turning. He's got some real interesting things to say because he said that the 2008 depression, they can call it a recession all they want to. It's a depression, and the only reason we don't see soup kitchens is because there's food stamps now. And something else that he said was that people got tired of millennials, but they laugh about the millennials moving back home. Well, heck, millennials were hit with 2 recessions when they got out of high school. Most generations are hit with 1 recession, but not the millennials. They've been hit with 2. So I get really kind of highly offended when you talk about millennials and that, they're somehow doodless or not capable. I think they're a very capable generation in that they will do astonishing things. But for this guy to say each generation when they come to power that they right the wrongs of the past. Come on now. My people are still toiling, working. And your people are still toiling and working. Who are these people that keep coming into power? It's the same bankers and the same families. It's not us. And this is why they can recycle us, like using the words like, I'm going to show you one. This is a good one. And they've been using it a lot in this campaign. Join the revolution. Revolution. Join that revolution. Oh, join that revolution. Oh, it's a revolution. We're having a revolution. We're really going to reinvent the wheel. We are reinventing the wheel. But what is revolution? If I take that line and get rid of the because remember and remember, retard. I mean, anything with a recycle, it's got a problem. It's not the real word. So what the word is, volution. Volution. So what is that word, volution? And what is it that we should be doing? Well, look at the word evolution. 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 There it is. I took the R off. Evolution. Because if you're evolving, you're not, heck, I'm running out of paper. But if you're evolving, okay, let me tell you the difference. Revolve. This is revolve. I am revolving. Evolve. Evolve is going up. Yeah. I'll show you. It's like this plant. You see that little plant right here? No, it's not. They're almost up. It's okay. You see this plant right here? Mm-hmm. He likes to look at the sun. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he does. And so I have to turn him this way. See? Yeah. So I have to turn him. See, away from the sun. See, you got some little leaves there. He's real happy looking at the sun. He's perky. He's real happy because the sun has rose right here in Georgia. But I have to turn that plant away from the sun for it to be balanced and grow. And anybody that's got house plants knows, yeah, that's where that microphone and everything belongs, on the ground, because I don't know how to use it. But anyway, when we apply our attention to higher frequencies of love, because let's know this, fear is like a microwave frequency. It's very low vibration, and it's upsetting and disturbing to us and to our bodies. But a higher frequency of love is healing. That's just why you can tell a baby, let me kiss it, and make it better. And don't think that don't work, because one day that little 2-year-old, I forget what I was doing, but hit my finger with a nail or hammer or something. Oh, and it hurt. And she said, Mama, you want me to kiss it and make it better? And I thought, oh, holy shit. Every time I kiss her when she's hurt, she stops crying. So I don't want her to think it don't work. I better let her kiss it. And so she kissed it. And guess what? It stopped hurting. What happened? I really think that child had faith enough to believe that her kissing my finger would make the hurt go away. And because I accepted her love, it did. It went away. And you have to experience something like that to think, holy crap, is that how Jesus healed people? I mean, just with an okay, I believe it. Um, Maybe. I don't know. Because when my baby did that, I didn't hurt anymore. So I'm gonna tell you something. All through life experience, I try to pull the pieces of a puzzle together. And just like that plant, I want to orientate myself every day to resonate love. And how I do that is like how that plant, now what he'll do in a day or two is he'll turn his leaves. Oh, he'll work and he'll turn his little leaves back up to the his point of his all his effort, in producing new leaves and everything, or she um, will turn to the light to create the photosynthesis necessary for good root and good function of the plant. So it's the same way with us. When we turn our attention to away from the world and the outer world of cycles of recycling revolutions, this is what they do. The taskmasters recycle revolution, because think of a revolution where people were ever free. There's not one. Every time a revolution happened, a new government or taskmaster was put in power that never helped the common people. There was no profit sharing or unions, or there was no shared division of work or power. So when they talk about the word revolution, it's not revolutionary to me, because see, my people, I remember their efforts for the greater America and the greater story, because Mother Jones, yeah, this one, she said one day that men will look back upon these people that marched upon Blair Mountain, and they will say they saw men of intelligence, men of integrity, men who wanted to create a great nation, not one who wanted to tear it down. And I think therein lies the problem, because this guy, Neil Howe, called my papa's generation the lost generation. So you have the millennials, you have the Generation X, you have the baby boomers. See, they teach us all this stuff. And the GIs, who are the senior citizens. But I had to Google to find out, what did he call that generation from 1900 to 1920. I see Papa was born, I think he was born in 1887. So I think, anyway, I don't remember. Yeah, I forgot. But the fact that he called that generation a lost generation pissed me off. It really kind of pissed me off, because the Roaring Twenties, see, after they tore off, well, see, you have to remember too, they created the Federal Reserve 1913. So while these national elite world bankers are right out here, I live in Brunswick, Georgia, in Glenn County, and honey, it ain't 5 miles away where they created the Federal Reserve. This place is the creature from Jekyll Island. It's just a monster. the Federal Reserve and what they did to us, good people, good working people. It's a shame. So in the timeline generation, you know, the people weren't lost. The people had found their humanity. Yeah, the people, see, by 1900, 1910, them freed slaves and them poor ass white Irish and them poor ass white Italian and whatever you want to call them, they found their humanity and they were brothers and sisters keepers. But you know, you had this banking elite creating this Federal Reserve in 1913. Then you had what he called it, what it is, was the Roaring Twenties. Well, of course, everybody was in the wealthy was doing great. But like he said, there was prohibition, there was child labor laws passed. I don't really, I'd have to Google it to be sure exactly when any child labor law was passed. But I can tell you that there wasn't any real social changes made. And to call that generation the lost generation because there were kids drinking very young, prostituting very young, homelessness. It was just he called it he called it the lost generation, like they lost their minds or something, you know. But, you know, I tend to disagree because in 1910, 1900, 1910, 1920, to get to this, it took them 20 years because Cabin Creek, Paint Creek strikes started in 1910, 1904. Um, this was a 20-year struggle right here. So this was one whole generation struggle. But it's not in the history books. It's a missed story. Again, it's a mystery. It's a mystery. And they want you to think that lost generation needed to be forgotten because they were in the roaring 20s and they were just, you know, flapper girls and drinking and having parties and all that kind of crap. Not one time did that man mention labor. Of course, he ain't never had no kids. He never birthed no babies. This Neil Howe, this fourth generation, is turning. He talks about he never met me. I'm just saying, on this Labor Day, we won't belabor the fact that we've been mistreated. We know we've been mistreated. What I do want to end up with is that we have a chance. We have a chance around the world to claim a common humanity using social media to talk to each other and to tell stories and to remember common decency. Because believe me, these people who write the history books, they don't have common decency. Well, they write all kind of books, you know. They write books. They write all kind of books. And propaganda. As I said in the first video, propping Pappy up. And what would Pappy be if we're propaganda is propping Pappy up? Patriarchy. Propping up patriarchy and empire. And you might as well say Pappy. Pappy is papacy. The Pope. The Pope. Let me tell you something. My people was Irish, but they was not good Catholics. No, they was not good Catholics. And I think that the corporate master, the coal master, Papa said they built churches for the coal miners to attend, and then they would pay the preachers from the company to preach. And Papa said the miners, union miners, they never went to church. They knew that their lives were in danger because it was really the most dangerous job in the world at that time was mining. and especially in the state of West Virginia, they had more people die in the mines in 1900 to 1920 than anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world. You think about that. There was mines everywhere in the world. Worst mines for fatalities was in West Virginia. So do you think that those people had a right to choose a family of men, that no matter what their color or how they talked or the way they dressed, that any of that crap mattered? The only thing they had in common was this. And, I've heard it through many stories that sometimes it would have just been a tatter, a scrap, and they would tear it and pin it right here to their lapel. And this is where the word redneck come from. And it's not because we called ourselves rednecks, but it's because Don Chafin, who was the sheriff in the county where they were trying to overcome this high ridge and go over into the next counties to free the fellow workers, the sheriff Don Chafin told a news dispatch from Virginia. Somebody from the front lines came, because see, they had Tommy guns and Gatling guns at the top of the ridge. Even in the Art of War, it said, if they have the high ground, it's not a good time to go to fight. The one thing that the miners had that they didn't have at the top of the hill was love. And they knew the old deer trails and the squirrel trails, and eventually they would have won that war if the federal government had not come in and asked them to lay down their arms. And see, they were good veterans from World War One, and they still respected their country, and they thought that the country would somehow own up to protecting its citizens from this debauchery. But it was truly exactly opposite of that. It just didn't happen for them. And so Sheriff Don Chafin told some of the men on the front line, my regards to the boys on the front line, and go kill all the rednecks that you can. And so in the printed press and in the Smithsonian, it said that was the first time in a printed press the word redneck was used in a story. And, I'm not going to fight about some people who think that redneck came from sunburns on the back of a neck, or rednecks mean people who drink a lot of beer. And, well, hey, that's what they said about hillbillies. They moonshiners and, inbreds and all that crap. All they ever do that for is propaganda to cheapen your labor and cheapen what they're going to pay you. Because if they can devalue you as an individual, whether you have a different color or different immigration status or race or whatever, it's to dismember. The dismemberment, remember? Dismember. They want to dismember us. And also in Neil Howe, his book I thought was pretty astonishing, because he did mention Reagan and the Reagan years, and he paralleled that. Was really, ugh. I said, I could eviscerate this guy if I really wanted to, but I don't want to eviscerate anyone, because I have love for them, because there are none so blind as those who will not see. He even goes on to say, in the repetitive way that this 80-year cycle happens, that Reagan had the boom, the 90s, the booming, like the roaring 20s was similar to this roaring 90s. But what he didn't say, and he didn't go there, was that Reagan destroyed the unions. Holy shit, do you remember? It's Labor Day. Do you remember? I remember Reagan and Petco and the air traffic controllers, and he went after those unions, and they've been dismembering us ever since. Dismemberment. The teachers unions and the firefighters in Wisconsin, I mean, come on. Because see what they're setting us up for is a recycle. They're just setting a reset button. They're not trying to really cultivate a family, a man, cultivating. To use the plant. Look at nature. She loves you very much. She will teach you. You need to know. She loves you very much. Look to the light. Look inwardly and grow a strong backbone. Find your own understanding or inner standing, as I've heard people say, this inner standing. But find your own standing and your own backbone so that you can determine for yourself what is and what isn't true. Because you're not going to find it written in a book. Pay for it going to church, and you're not going to get it by marrying the right woman or buying the right car or getting the right house. Light, this inward knowledge that can reveal things to you. Right. Because by the mother who birthed you, and when you took your breath into the world, you became a living soul. This is what the Bible says. So now you are experiencing his own creation through his own manifestation of his thought. We're all qualitatively little sparks of the divine. This is why it talks about Jesus had, and Pentecost, they had the fire, little tongues of fire above their heads. Well, they were resonating with a high frequency, resonating love, and they were aware of their divinity. And if they could keep us divided and working and workers and tired, exhausted, we don't even have time to play with our kids. How can we do any inner work or have time to have some quiet meditation out in nature? How do we have time to find the light within? Because it's there. It's there. But that's why I'm doing these videos, to encourage you on Labor Day to not look to man's understanding or lean upon man's understanding, but lean upon your own understanding, your own light. And when you turn yourself like this toward the light, towards the universal good for the greater mankind, you will be attenuated. Your attention is then focused on the greater good. And you want to be a conduit to create the greater good. And this is why Jesus said the fields are ripe to harvest and the workers are few. Because once you become enlightened, it's a responsibility. You can't hold it for yourself. You'll get burned, and you can't hide it under a bushel. I can tell you, my grandmother used to sing that song, "This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine." Now that's what we're talking about. The old people knew what the shine was. And you can tell when someone's shining. They are absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Full of light. Full of lightness of heart. Full of love. So I'll leave you with that today. I feel like, I saw they're remaking Birth of a Nation, and I just think it's a bunch of crap because Neil Howe in the fourth turning, he bragging on Reagan and how he had this economic boom in the 90s and how they, deregulated everything. Well, that's what they did in the 20s. As soon as they set that banking cartel up in 1913, the Federal Reserve, then they deregulated all kind of stuff. And what happened to labor? Well, my people was in prison for Blair Mountain, many of them for 10 years. hundreds and hundreds of them. And yet they laid down their arms because they loved their country and they trusted their government for a fair review, and they never got it. They never got it until 1933 when the Labor Relations Act was passed. And if you want to watch a documentary on FDR and labor, can't think of the name of it right now, but just Google it. He went to the heads of labor and said, make me pass a bill. Get active. Make me pass a labor bill. Because that's what the bankers needed. That's what corporate master wanted. See, corporate master wanted to be able to tell this story 80, 90 years later about this fourth turning and this thing going on. Don't think his stuff don't sit in think tanks. They don't plan the next 100, 200 years down the road for us, cattle or sheeple or whatever they want to call us, because they do. And now, like I said in that first video, you gonna call me a conspiracy theorist? Well, then we'll have to put tinfoil on my grandfather's head and tinfoil on the old man's head from Cabin Creek. They didn't have TV. They didn't have radio, and they believed in conspiracies. Because conspiracies is when men conspire in ways to harm others. It's funny. You don't hear about women conspiring in ways to harm many people. Papacy. Prop and pappy up. Propaganda. So I birthed the nation today. I hope I birthed the story. And I hope that you will share your common humanity. And every day when you wake up, you will attune yourself to the light, and you just even ask the light to just shine on me, and let me learn about you, and walk around outside in nature and look at the trees and look at the birds and look at all the beautiful things, smell the air. All of it's out there for our education. It's not there to harm us. And the closer we get to our nature, or the natural way of being, the sooner we will see a paradise on earth. And I don't remember which of those great thinkers said it, but he said there'll be no paradise until there is no murder. And one thing that I will leave you with that Neil Howe did say was that the millennials, crime has gone down, birth rates has gone down, but crime has gone down. Now, why would that happen? Well, friends, I hope that the war on drugs, or the war on poor people on drugs, of course, that was Reagan too, see, is over. And that private prisons will go the route of the trash can, so that the trash truck can pick their shit up out there at the side of the road. Wackenhut, private prisons, Baldwin Felts, thugs, you name them. They're all about the flesh trade and bondage and keeping people down. And I have a common way of talking. My thoughts are not common, but the common way I talk is so that I can reach as many people as I can with the information that I have to share. Because I love humanity, and I knew that at an early age, because there was a lot of people that's loved me along the way, and I didn't get it from my early childhood or my family. I could have easily chose to be a psychopath or anything else. I mean, we could choose to be anything we want in this life, but it's really a choice. So on Labor Day today, just remember 95 years ago, that there was a generation that they called the lost generation. But I say they was the found generation, because they found truth. So if you have something in the lost and found box, most places you have a lost and found, they say, well, baby, let's go check your lost and found. Lost and found, Mama? What's that? I said, it's a place where they put things that if you lose it, they'll hold it till you come back. Because maybe if you lost it there, you can come back and we'll go back to that restaurant and see if they have a lost and found and see if your little toy is there. And guess what? Daughter found something of hers in the lost and found, and she was so happy. And that's how I feel today on Labor Day about the lost and found. Because for that man to call that generation that fought all those labor battles the lost generation is kind of a slap in the face of workers. He didn't even mention. And when you want to talk about generations, don't go back 80 years. How about going back 100? Even the Bible says a day is like 100 in God's eyes. So, you know, don't discount people, what the old people told you. The old people knew best. And not saying I know what's best, because I'm learning a lot from you young people, but I can say on Labor Day that let's pull this little thing out of the lost and found. And when we tie it on, let's become brothers and sisters keepers. Be careful out there if you're picketing today or if you're working to have a living wage. Oh yeah, and I said I wanted to show you how to do a action if you're home and you want to be peacefully non-compliant with the system. One of the ways you can do that is mail, and then when you open it up, oh yeah, see this one here? It has no postage necessary. I like to do this out at the mailbox myself. My aunt told me they pay a flat rate. Usually I use the envelope that they sent it in, you know. I stick that back in the envelope for them. They might want to reuse that. I don't know. Oh, here's something about a credit card. Well, heck, they might need to understand what that means. I don't need it. If I have a Dunkin' Donut coupons or something, I hope I stick it in there and hope they buy themselves a coffee. Oh, well, here's a nice something about another charge card. Well, instead of just their charge card, why don't they just, let's just well, heck, let's see what other pieces of scrap paper I got. Yeah. How about this one? It says the lost. We're gonna. Let me just tell you. I found them, so I don't need this lost generation that Neil Howe calls these people to mind. They weren't lost. The people who was lost was working their ass out in Jekyll Island, having freed slaves wear gloves, serving them food and stuff while they was rigging the financial system for us to fail today. See, the lost people is the corporate masters and the bankers. So, in my nice little way to salute all of the methodologies they use to divide us and all the trees they cut down to make this paper, now this envelope is kind of fat. So, it's going right away back to new card holder. But see, it's heavy. It's heavy now. And what I was told is they have to pay the price of having to come pick it up because it doesn't just go delivered to their P.O. box number. It is held because they paid a flat rate for you to put that one little skinny piece of card in there. So when you put other stuff in it, what happens? Now it weighs more. So this company or corporation is going to have to pay a few pennies more to pick it up. And I love to do that right at my mailbox. Put the flag back up, send it right back to them. A lot of time, and that one right there, I just put, it had my name and address on it. You know, the government do not call list. Well, how about do not write? How about do not send me junk mail? How about don't send me coupons I'm not going to use? See, this system is wasteful, wasteful. And all it does is try to distract you, to dismember you from your family. And I mean your real family and your greater family of man. And we can put an end to it in peaceful, non-compliant ways. I'm not complying with the system because when I packed that envelope, that was called non-compliance, peaceful non-compliance. So, when a motor's running on 6 cylinders or 8 cylinders, and you guys know how that sounds. I really like the sound of an 8 cylinder motor when it's running. But guess what? I heard a Viper motor run. It's 12 cylinders. And I feel like in my life, I've run on 8 cylinders most of my life because I walk pretty boldly with authority because that's who I am and that's who my people are. Let me tell you something. Once I got inside myself and found my true self and connected with eternal sources of being, I'm running on 12 cylinders now. 12. Yeah, 12. So you can too. You can be that Viper motor. You can be that one. You can do it all. It's inside each and every one of us because you don't have to tell the plant to turn to the light. The plant knows how to turn to the light, and so do you. So do I. It was already born in us. And so it's not no worry. Just choose it. You have a choice every day. Choose love. Because love holds dominion over hate, and love holds dominion over the whole world. And because of the love, we will get through this thing. That guy said this fourth turning, it can end real badly with like a third world war or another economic crash, or it might end really good. And I thought, well, isn't that nice of Mr. Corporate Master to figure out for us poor little people down here how they study all these generational trends and aging. What they're really doing is just like cattle putting us down this line. Oh, you're going to St. Louis. You go or the hump yard at the railroad tracks, when they bring a train up on the hump yard, what they got these, they uncouple the car and the car will go down this track. Oh, that one's going to St. Louis. Oh, this one's going to Chicago. Oh, this one's going to New York. Oh, this one's going that way. And what they've done is uncouple our love train. The love train. They made a song about that. Get on board the love train. So we can couple it back together, by our resonating love and listening with our inner ear and listening for the inner knowledge and remembering and bringing back the members of our families together, uniting for a better common world where not one person is looked upon any longer as a worm or a worker, that we see each man as our brother and each woman as our sister, and then that we, in that respect, care for them, even in a small way that I can today. I hope that I've done that. And I love you. So I'm signing off. Pray to God YouTube will allow me to upload this video because the one I did last night, I kind of did cuss a little bit and get carried away. So maybe this one, Corporate Master will let it roll. All right. Thank you for listening. Tune in. Please subscribe. You can find me at jeanabrown.com, JEANA Brown.com. I would love to come speak and talk to your peoples about how to motivate and encourage and tell a little bit more of the